So again, thank you for joining us. As I mentioned, I'm Eric Wilkinson, one of the 4 therapists in the Office of Work Life. Today's presentation is going to be on family connections when life speeds up. And this is a topic that I really have been kind of interested in going back to the early days, particularly the early days of smartphones, and noticing how accelerated everyone's lives have become. With emails, with text messages, with videos, both children and adults alike. Um, we tend to live very busy. We tend to live very fast paced. And I think it presents both opportunities and challenges to form meaningful connections with our families and with kids specifically. So let me just start by just kind of going over some of the research around why parent bonding matters. We know that kids that grow up with parents who are either rejecting or tend to be controlling in their parenting style, they are more susceptible or more vulnerable to experiencing low self-esteem, to having fear of failure, being afraid of making mistakes. There's higher rates of anxiety and depression in children that grow up with parents who are either rejecting or controlling. And there tends to be attachment problems both in childhood and into adult relationships. Conversely, we know that healthy bonding with parents is associated with positive self-esteem in children, positive social emotional health. This means the capacity to be aware of other people's feelings, to reciprocate, to make friendships, to have emotional intelligence, but also to be aware of their own feelings and to be aware of their own needs. Or healthy bonding with parents is associated with positive cognitive development and achievement in both in school and then in kind of in a broader scheme, achievement in career. And we know that resiliency is really the foundation for resiliency in human beings is really closely connected to the bonding relationship that children have with their primary caregiver. A lot of the research has really confirmed what John Bowlby theorized with attachment theory. Just quick reminder, 2 real basic principles are one, that secure attachment is achieved when caregivers respond to children's needs consistently and provides safety so that the child can explore and develop. We know that children, the second point is that we know that children develop internal working models. Their sense of self and their sense of the world is largely linked to their experiences with caregivers, particularly in those first 5 years. Now, there are other factors that contributed to sense of self, such as culture, life experiences. But when it comes down to the issue of am I a good person? Am I worthy of love? And is the world a good place? And is it safe? It's really the relationship with primary caregivers that help children develop these internal maps for the world and for themselves. There is this, it's a 25 item instrument that measures or kind of assesses different parenting styles. It's called the parent bonding instrument. It's used in a lot of research around parent bonding and uh, social emotional outcomes for children and adults. And basically, there's 25 questions that result in kind of 4 different parenting styles. Optimal parenting includes where there's both a high level of caring for the child, lots of warmth and affection, but a low level of control, meaning that they respect the independent wishes of their child, of course, maintaining safety, but really promoting autonomy and independence. They allow the child to explore the world, to make mistakes. So that's optimal parenting. Another parenting style would be considered affectionate constraint. This is where there still is a high level of caring and warmth in the relationship, But this is kind of like the helicopter parent. This is where there's a lot of control, where there's a lot of intervention on the parent, where the parent wants to do things for the child or wants to make sure that everything goes well, really wants to try to prevent the child from making mistakes. A third parenting style would be considered affectionless control. This is where there's a low level of caring, but still a high level of wanting to make sure that of protecting the child and kind of controlling how the child lives. And then the fourth parenting style will be considered neglectful parenting, and this is where there's both a low level of caring and a low level of control. And so, as caregivers or as parents, um, we really want to kind of aspire towards that optimal parenting, where we're able to give a high level of caring, but we also have a low level of control with our children. Again, low level of control does not mean that we put them in unsafe situations. It means that we respect their independence, their individual choices. We allow them to make mistakes. We encourage them to explore the world. Challenges in terms of parenting and caregiving. Many of us have competing life demands, lots of responsibilities. These can include our professional jobs and our professional responsibilities. Um, a lot of parents are caring for both children and for their own parents. So that kind of that sandwich generation. There's also demands in terms of their relationships with partners, relationships with friends, um, even just the challenge or sometimes what feels like it may be a conflict between caring for oneself and caring for one's child. So there's lots of demands. And I do think that something that's really changed within the last 15, 20 years is that um, it's hard, the boundary between work and home life has really become a lot more porous, a lot less defined. It's often blurred. And so it's it's not as easy as it is to kind of say, I'm going to let go of work and I'm going to just focus on my family or my child, as maybe as it once was when there was not so much media saturation. There's also this tendency that we have as a culture to overschedule. There's been a lot of research that's documented that there's less and less unstructured time for kids, less and less playtime. We see this both in how the school days are structured. Recess is usually the first thing to either be cut or to be reduced. We know that for many of us, we have good intentions, and so we try to enroll our children in lots of after school activities. But what can happen is that, you know, next thing we know, every hour of every day seems to be scheduled with something to do. And this is a challenge in terms of connecting and bonding. Parent mental and physical health is a challenge. If, as a parent or as a caregiver, if you're not doing well emotionally or mentally or physically, it can really interfere with relationship building with your child. Uh, Parents who suffer from depression and anxiety are particularly at risk for maybe having some barriers to healthy bonding with their child. Family conflicts. So this could be conflicts between partners, or it could be conflicts between generations within a family, or conflicts between, arise out of blended families, or conflicts between children and other children in the family. When there are elevated family conflicts, this can often drain a lot of energy from the caregivers, take a lot of their time and their focus. It can also just kind of create a stressful environment where it's hard to be and play with our kids and to bond. The behavioral health, the mental health, and the temperament of children themselves can become a challenge sometimes in terms of forming bonds. We know that children who have behavioral disorders um, tend to be rejected more by caregivers. Um, Children that may struggle with language skills or expressing their emotions, children that struggle with regulating their emotions may be more at risk for having ruptures in their relationship with caregivers. Electronic media, I feel like, is so pervasive that it's often interrupting in many of our relationships, including our caregiving and our bonding with our children. And then fast culture, this is a concept that was developed by the sociologist Ben Agar. This is really getting at the fact that we live in a culture where there's emphasis on, fast food, fast dieting, fast exercise. Um, and in terms of what children often experience through media, there's also this pressure to grow up fast, to look older than they are, to take on responsibilities that maybe are not consistent with their age or development. So there's just a lot of pressure all the time to be doing something, achieving something, obtaining something. Even if we think about the kind of the endless promotion of self-improvement projects, this creates this kind of constant feeling of pressure within ourselves that there's something wrong with me and I need to continue to work on myself and get better. This is message to us all the time within our culture. So when we start to think about connecting strategies, I think it's important to acknowledge first and foremost that in order to be to connect with kids as caregivers and as parents, you first have to prioritize your own emotional, mental, and physical health. If you are not getting adequate sleep, or if your stress levels are off the charts, or if you're feeling sad or depressed, all these things make it very difficult to be available to your child or to your teen. And so it always kind of starts with you, not only because you have to have the emotional and physical resources to be able to bond with your child, but also you're a role model for your child. And so the way that you live, we're constantly kind of, our children are on a unconscious or on a subtle level are internalizing our habits. And so I can't stress enough, starting with yourself, recognizing that if you're not taking care of your needs, if you're not, meeting with friends, if you're not doing things you like, if you're not eating healthy, if you're not getting sleep, that this is going to make it challenging to be the best caregiver or parent. Mindfulness is really important because kids know when we're distracted. What they are really craving more than anything, especially younger children, but even more than most of us realize, teenagers, is they really want to be seen and heard. They want our attention. So mindfulness, there's two key components to mindfulness. One is just awareness of what's happening in the present moment, and the other is acceptance, which means that you're not in denial about what's happening. Acceptance is not approval. It just means that if you're feeling sad, not only are you aware that you're feeling sad, but you don't try to deny it or minimize it. If you're feeling tired, you're aware that you're tired, but again, you don't just say, "Oh, it's not a big deal." If you Mindfulness includes mindfulness of self, what's going on with you as a caregiver, as a parent, and it means mindfulness of your child, paying attention to what's going on with them, being aware of it, acknowledging, not being in denial. And it also means uh, mindfulness of your relationship with your child. So there's kind of three levels to it: awareness of what's going on with you, awareness of what's going on with your child, and then awareness of what's going on between you and your child. Intentional living, this is where we decide for ourselves what are our priorities, what are our values, and we make decisions where we live in a way that's consistent with our values, not just reacting to the demands that are placed upon us, or not just acting out of habit, but saying, I'm going this weekend, I'm going to prioritize going to the park with my kids, even though I feel like maybe there's 10 other things that I could be doing or I feel like I should be doing. My values are such that I want to prioritize relationship, and I'm making that decision. Maybe the lawn doesn't get mowed, or maybe I don't get to the grocery store. Um, I'm going to prioritize that quality time. That's intentional living based on values. Self compassion is where we are kind to ourselves when things get difficult or when we make mistakes, because we all make mistakes. And I think the challenges for parents and caregivers are as great as they've ever been. We have less, family support than most of the existence of human beings. We have less social support. We tend to be more isolated. We work longer hours. We get less breaks in terms of the clear boundaries between work and home life. There's a lot more, in some ways, there's more risk to our children that we have to kind of monitor. Um, there's a lot of competing agendas. All these things make the work of being a caregiver and a parent really hard. So self-compassion is basically acknowledging when you're experiencing some difficulty, saying to yourself, wow, this is really hard right now, or this is a really hard developmental stage that my child is in. First, it's acknowledging what you're feeling, honoring what you're feeling, but then also responding to yourself with some kindness, saying, you know what, you're doing the best you can, or saying it's okay, it's gonna be okay, or reminding yourself nobody's perfect. It might be self-compassion might be saying, I need to take a walk, or I need to take a break. It might be that I need to plan a dinner with my friends to kind of to decompress. So self-compassion can be both just being kind to ourselves in terms of words and in terms of our thinking, but it also can be in terms of taking action and prioritizing our needs when we're going through difficult times. Again, the reason why I started with this slide is because this is often the thing that parents neglect the most. They focus on their children and they don't pay attention to their own needs, and that is not really sustainable over a long period of time. Okay, so connection strategies, and for folks that if you put comments in the chat, I will address those at the end of the presentation. So feel free if something comes to mind, or if you have a comment or you have a question, you can put it in the chat, and then at the end I will address them. If we think about what's the most important thing, it's just being smiling at our child. It's bringing emotional warmth and affection. When we look at what results in positive, healthy bonding, this is the biggest predictor. Is there warmth and affection in the relationship? Do we celebrate with our child? Do we laugh with our child? Do we play with our child? Do we give our child a hug? Do we give them a high five? And so this is an essential ingredient. It's more important than any kind of particular parenting technique, or, it's way more important than how you execute a timeout, or how use labeled praise. Warmth and affection is the foundation of your bond with your child. Empathy and compassion. Empathy is feeling with our child. So it's noticing what our child is feeling when they're feeling it, and it's not dismissing it. Sometimes we have a tendency to say, well, everybody goes to that, or they're just acting like a teenager. They're making a big deal out of nothing. Here's the thing, if something is really upsetting to your child, it's a big deal to them. And empathy means that you're able to connect with what they're feeling and say to them, I can see that this is really hard for you, or I can see that you're really upset. So that's the feeling with. And then the compassion part is where we're then motivated in some way to try to alleviate their suffering or alleviate their discomfort, to take action to protect them or to encourage them. It doesn't always mean that we can solve their problems or take their pain away, but I like to use the metaphor of if your child has the flu. If your child has the flu, you know that it kind of has to run its course. There's no medicine that you can give them where they just immediately feel better. But when your child has the flu, we do nice things for them, right? We cook them chicken noodle soup, or we make sure that their favorite TV show is on. We check in on them. We kiss them on the forehead. And these things, even though it doesn't take their pain away or their discomfort away, it makes them feel better. So it's not always about fixing the problem. Sometimes it's just showing care and concern when our child is going through a difficult time. If you have a teenager that goes through their first breakup, I mean, there's nothing you can do to suddenly say, I'm going to fix this. I'm going to get you back in this relationship. It's more about, I'm here for you, sweetie. I know this is really hard, and being encouraging and kind, asking them, what are you feeling? what's going on? How are you? Checking in on them. We generate warmth and emotional warmth, often through, maybe primarily through play. Certainly for young children, infants and toddlers, play is essential, but even for teenagers. If we think about, if there's a lot of conflict between you and a teen, that is a signal that, hey, let's figure out something fun to do together. Let's get back to playing with each other. Because if we can do something fun, if we can play, this will re- either repair or rebuild our bond. Specific to play, it's really nice when we can either let the child take the lead in terms of what kind of play they prefer, have at least, or co-creating with them, letting them have a voice so that we don't say, this is what we're going to do today. We're going to go hiking, whether you like it or not. We try to give them opportunities to make choices and follow their lead when possible. And at the very least, we want to try to co-create with them, play with them. I mentioned this in a future slide, but for young children, particularly school-age children, imaginative play is really important. And then finally, labeled praise. Praise in general is good. If you say, "Oh, you're such a rock star," that's nice. And I encourage you to let your kids know they're a rock star as often as you want to let them know that. But if you can be real specific, like, I really like how you kept working on that math homework even when it was frustrating you, you didn't give up. Or, I like how when you got frustrated with your sister and you took a break, you went upstairs and calmed down. Or maybe it's just like, I really like how, you're being so creative and thinking through what characters you want to be for Halloween. So labeled praise is ideal, but kids cannot get enough praise, even if it's just being told you are like the best kid in the world or you're a rock star. That type of praise has value too. Okay, another strategy is just cultivating presence. And what I mean by this is that this is closely related to mindfulness, but it's this idea that we unschedule, that we create some opportunities for downtime when there's nothing to do but just be with our experience. Um, there is, when children have access to free or unstructured play, this is really when they start to develop their creativity, their problem solving skills, their ability to take the perspective of other people, learning to share. Is when they learn to navigate difficult emotions, to explore difficult emotions. Is where they start to make sense of the world. This exploration of both relationship to others, relationship with ourselves, emotions, creativity, critical thinking, these things are largely and primarily accomplished through unstructured play. And so that can be as simple as, let's go outside and do make believe, play make believe, or let's go to the park. Or it could be, let's just draw something. Let's just get out the markers and or the paints and make something. So free and unstructured play is really important. Within mindfulness cognitive therapy tradition, there's this distinction made between being mode and doing mode. Doing mode is where many of us spend many hours, if not almost all the hours of our day. Doing mode is where we're task oriented. It's like, let me get this done. Let me focus on what I need to do next. It's kind of means end. And we have to be in doing mode often for work. If we go to the grocery store and we got to execute, our grocery list, we got to be in doing mode. There are plenty of times where we're in doing mode where we're just trying to accomplish something, a means to an end. Being mode is where there's nothing to do. It's just that we're just open to our experience. I like to think of it, I use the metaphor of sitting around a campfire. Many of us enjoy that because in that moment we feel the heat from the campfire. We are we're looking at how beautiful the flames are. We're listening to the crackle and pop of the campfire. We're not really doing anything. We're just completely immersed in our experience. Um, when we're with our children, if we can be if we can enter into being mode where we can just be present with our experience, our children feel deeply connected during those times. We are sharing this moment together. And it's not because we're trying to achieve something. We're not trying to like prepare you for your next test, or it's not we're not trying to get through the bedtime routine so you can go and get into bed. This is just about us enjoying each other's company, of being with our experience. And it's even important, or as important, when one or either us as adults or our children are going through difficult moments, of being able to connect with what am I feeling right now, noticing that, and being with our child when they're going through a hard time. And then also, creating presence can be facilitated by planned screen-free time, where nobody's on any screens. They're not on their phones or their tablets or their laptops, or they're not in front of a TV or a computer screen. It's really nice that and recommended to have certain times of the day where there's just are no screens being engaged by anybody. Two times that are excellent opportunities for that are dinner time and bedtime, but also just knowing that if we're going to be doing some free or unstructured play, a lot of times that is best accomplished when there's not screens involved. Okay, and this leads into this idea of quality time. It's not so much that we spend more time with our children. We could spend 3 hours with our child, and if our mind is wandering, or we're distracted the whole time, or we are criticizing them, or we're minimizing what they're feeling, those 3 hours are not particularly helpful. And in fact, they could actually be harmful. Um, Having 10 or 15 minutes where your child has your undivided attention, that is quality of time. That is quality time. And really, if you're thinking about what's a goal for kids that are school age and beyond, 15 to 30 minutes for each child where you can just give them your undivided attention. It could be asking them what their day was like. It could be letting them choose some activity to do with them, child directed or co created play. Within parent child interaction therapy, they have something called special play time. And this is like a really formal structured time where you're able to say, okay, for the next 10 or 15 minutes, you get to decide what we're playing, and you just completely follow their lead. There's specific things that they teach parents to do. One is to narrate the child's play. So you're following the child's lead. So if they're putting one block on top of another, you would say something like, oh, you're stacking the red block on the blue block. If they are taking a little action figure and making them climb the wall, you would say, oh, you're making that action figure climb the wall. If they get excited, so that narrating part lets them know that they have your full attention, that they're completely seen and heard. Mirroring back to them or reflecting back to them their emotions. So if they get excited and like, wow, you respond back to them, wow, so just reflecting back, looking for opportunities to affirm them, to say, I really like how you're playing gently with the toys, or I really like how you're taking time stacking those blocks. So looking for opportunities to affirm them. I really like how you're using your imagination. Um, this is something that's part of parent-child interaction therapy, but I think there's benefit to all school age children. And again, there's not a perfect way of doing this. It's more that you set an intentional goal of saying, I'm going to try to give my child 15 to 30 minutes every day, undivided attention, as often as I can. We know there's going to be some days where that doesn't happen, and that's where we are kind to ourselves and offer ourselves self-compassion. But the more we can do that, the more we strengthen the bond. When I work with families where children have explosive behaviors or a lot of behavioral difficulties, if I do parent-child interaction therapy, before we ever start practicing timeout or giving choices and consequences, we start with special playtime first, because it's really about building or repairing the parent-child relationship. In creating special playtime, we usually see the child's behaviors improve before we even do anything like learning how to execute timeout or learning how to give choices and consequences. Okay, put a few slides in here because electronic media is such a huge part of both children and teens and adult lives. Um, a lot of the majority of this content on these next couple slides is coming from the American Academy of Pediatrics. First, it's important to note that not all screen time is the same. Screen time includes consumption of media, which is how many of us think about screen time, watching TV or watching something on your phone. It includes consumption of media. You could also be playing a video game. But screen time can be creation of media, or like making a TikTok video or a YouTube video, or you know, creating using some kind of platform where you create images. So creation of media. And then screen time also includes communication, where we use like FaceTime technology or we use Zoom. I have a sister who lives in Chicago and she has a 2-year-old, and 4 or 5 days out of the week, my mom will get on like the iPhone portal, and they will sing songs together through the portal, and they'll dance together, and they'll even do a pretend play. And this is communicating and playing through a screen. So screen time there's different types of screen time. What's most important is that as caregivers and as parents that we co-participate when our children are using screens as much as we can. That we're viewing, if we're watching a movie, we're watching it together. If they're playing video games, there's a lot more value if they play the video games with us. But it's really important because we also want to know what type of media they're engaging with. Media content the action media that they're engaging with is more important than the specific platform or even how much time they spend. So a lot of parents will say, well, I'm going to limit my kids' screen time to 30 minutes. Well, if it's positive screen time, like I was describing earlier, where my mom might portal with my niece and sing songs and dance and play, it might be an hour, but that's really healthy for her development. So more than the platform or the time, it's about what is the content of the media. There is research. I'm reluctant to admit this because I'm not a huge video game fan, but there is a lot of research in support of digital gaming that can improve mood and can reduce stress and can promote social skills. The key is that the games involve or that they reward cooperation, support, and helping behaviors. So we know that gaming, digital gaming, video games, they're not going away. They're here. So really trying to find high quality digital gaming can make a big difference. I remember working with a teenager, and the teenager told me that when they would be on YouTube videos, sometimes, or Twitch, sometimes they would start to feel social anxiety, like it would feel overwhelming to them. And so they would intentionally change the media that they were using. They would play, I can't remember, I think it's Animal Crossing is the game, and where you kind of grow a farm and you take care of animals. And so that would be an example of one of these games that encourages cooperation and support and helping behaviors. They would step away from YouTube or from Twitch, and they would start playing Animal Farm, and they would do that intentionally because they recognized that it calmed them down and made them feel better and improved their mood. There is, meta-analysis of different studies does show that playing violent video games is associated with increased aggressive behavior, hostile mood, physiological arousal, aggressive thoughts, and reductions in prosocial behaviors for the majority of participants. However, I always want to note that this is not true for every child that plays or teenager that plays violent video games. Intervening variables such as the child's or the teenager's self-esteem, what their home life is like, what their emotional and physical health is like, whether or not they're lonely or isolated, or whether they have social support, and the child's temperament. All these things can influence whether or not any of those aggressive behaviors emerge. All right, so now I'd like to move into just some specific ideas and things that you can do. One is game nights. Um, Games are really important. We know that they become increasingly important as kids move into school age. But if we think about even from a young age playing peekaboo, right? I mean, peekaboo is so wonderful for a child's development. So games help children and adolescents use their imagination, set goals, um, create a sense of control, um, sense of connection or community with others, being able to figure things out from a motor standpoint, learning able to manipulate objects, um, learning to deal with frustration. These are the things that games are so helpful in developing in children. Games, including digital games, provide children with a realistic expectation to see failure as a learning opportunity. So we know that when children grow up um, feeling like they must be perfect, that they can't make any mistakes, it, it's really hard to live. And a lot of the adults that I work with, the biggest source of stress and anxiety is fear of failure. So games can help us understand that failure, that we all fail sometimes, that this is part of learning, that in order to learn a new skill, you're going to fail at it. And there's also, as I mentioned, the benefits of patience, perseverance, and self-control. And this is, again, coming from the American Academy of Pediatrics. Teens and social media. This is a quote that I pulled. Teens use media to foster independence, to engage in vicarious experiences, to discover and validate identities, participate in social justice efforts. Online experiences help them build connection, community, and creativity. Traditional adolescent development now involves using and sometimes misusing digital tools. If we think about adolescence, it's really about figuring out who am I and what do I think about the world. And media is really good in terms of being able to see how different cultures live, how different people live, to form friendships, make friendships, feel connections. I know a lot of teenage boys and teenage men, for that matter, that get a lot of their social emotional needs met through online gaming and being able to chat and talk to the people they're gaming with. Like other media, in terms of social media, the same kind of things apply as other good parenting strategies. Setting limits on what type of media they engage with and how often. Being knowledgeable of the media that they're engaging with, asking them to show it to you. Like, let's do this together. Show me what you're playing. I want to watch you play. Um, Teaching them etiquette, like how do we treat people through the media? What are appropriate behaviors? What are safe behaviors? These are really important conversations, and they only happen if we are present and engaging with our kids while they're engaging with social media. Here's the quick summary of the recommendations. Set limits, avoid displacement. This means make sure, even though there's a lot of really good media out there in terms of development of problem solving skills and community building, just be aware, are they no longer exercising because they're on the media all the time? Are they no longer, visiting with friends because they're on media? So make sure that you're aware of what is being displaced. What's the media being chosen over? Um, if you notice that there's some important aspects of your child's development or their life that you feel like media is getting in the way of, in those situations, you need to take action. I mentioned that it's important to address digital etiquette, to talk to our kids about what cyberbullying looks like, about how we, that when we send things through the internet, they don't go away. Um, how we, it's important to treat people with kindness, online, just like we would in person. Um, really prioritizing trying to engage social media with your children. Having times when there's no screens. And then this is hard for many of us, modeling good behavior. If we want our kids to have a life outside of screens and have times when they're not on their phone, that we need to set the example. When it's dinner time, if we are on our phone, it's really hard to convince our child that they shouldn't be on their phone. So it's important to model good behavior. This is my last slide. This is going through some things I've already talked about, but these are more specific ideas of things that help in terms of bonding and connection. Imaginative play with toddlers and school age kids. I remember I used to play with this one toddler, or not toddler, I'm sorry, like a second grader. And we would just go to the park and we would just, play alligator chasing. We would be different animals, I mean, it's infinite what children can come up with. So this idea of really encouraging and supporting imaginative play. Looking for opportunities for the child to select the activities or to co-create together. Arts, crafts, music, these are really great things for parents or caregivers to do with school age and adolescent kids. Scheduling game nights for the family. It could be either board games, or it could be digital games, or it could be games outside. I'm a big proponent of nature exploration and getting outside, going on walks, doing scavenger hunts, swimming, bird watching. The idea of getting out and moving, there's lots of health benefits in terms of lowering depression and anxiety, elevating and improving mood. Just getting outside in itself tends to be beneficial to us. And when we do it with our children, it can be a wonderful bonding opportunity. Playing sports with our kids, throwing dance parties. When I hear a parent has dance parties with their kids, I pretty much know there's a good chance there's a really healthy bond there. Reading together. This could be reading traditional books, or it could be reading on like a Kindle or digital media. Um, Again, this idea that you're actually engaging in media together, if it's video games or it's FaceTime or Facebook, if it's you know Instagram, that hey, show me your Instagram page, show me some of your friends' Instagram pages, and then having conversations around it. Most importantly is the activities you choose are going to be specific to the interests of your child, their age, and to your interests. And so there's a million different ways that we can connect with our kids. The most important thing is that we're intentional about it, that we say, I'm going to prioritize this. I'm going to set aside time on a daily basis to do this. That intentionality, if you do that, everything else tends to come together. So with that, that concludes my presentation for today.